bring you in on this. Do you think we can go through a post-mortem here and argue, perhaps last April we could have ended things and there'll be a full inquiry and books will be written and movies will be made? But do you think, even if we can put this sorry tale behind us, it's changed our approach to risk, that you could imagine, say, restrictions coming in for a bad bout of seasonal flu, which we never would have considered 5 years ago, but now might be back to all face mask wearing, you need to show you've had the flu jab if you want to go to a football match. Do you think we'll be living with the psychological legacy of this and a change in our approach to risk, even if there's no new variants and COVID-19 can be consigned to history?
Yes, it depresses me to say so, but I think that not just because there is open discussion about the fact that COVID could return. I mean, that's something that people keep saying, and there's this new strain, maybe this and that. There are still whispers about that kind of thing. There is discussion about the effectiveness of sanitising and, even though it's small things like sanitising, but the rigmarole of it, of not touching certain things, not shaking hands with people, would be good around old people to prevent them dying from flu.
Sure.
All these things, I think it's not just that we've developed a new approach to risk, but we've compounded old trends that you've been talking about for years in relation to public health, with this idea that there are certain things about society and individual freedom that you should sacrifice to at the altar of this thing, public health, that has become such a bloated concept. Not in terms of, obviously if we have a new emergency of a new deadly virus, we might all be saying something different, because we forget that we all got caught off guard 2 years ago, and that was very serious. But it is important to have a post-mortem, and to, not just some kind of government whitewash inquiry, of which there have been several by now already, but a serious assessment of what went wrong and what mistakes the government made. Not to haul them over the coals, although I would quite like that, but to ensure that the same mistakes aren't made in the future, because we will be back in situations like this. There is the reality of living in an exciting global world in which things,
sure,
people travel and viruses travel. And in order to preempt that, we have to be able to get better at managing the cost of restricting society, which was great and I think underestimated, and balance that up with the price of protecting society.
Sure.
And at the moment, it's just way out of whack.
Andrew, what's your take on this generally as an economist? But do you think, I've always thought policymakers' ability to properly judge risk has been way too risk adverse and very partial. Some risks are taken extraordinarily seriously, others are ignored. Do you think our appetite for risk has diminished still further? If we were to look at the storm, total of 3 people died in the UK as a result. Tragic, yes, but 5 to 10 people every day die in road accidents. It's not particularly surprising that some would die in a storm. People were told to stay at home, schools and businesses shut in many areas. Transport for London urged people to avoid non-essential travel in and out of the capital, unless it was, only take a journey if it's essential. I considered going to Saints versus Everton to be essential travel on Saturday, so that was a 3-hour drive. But is all this typical of an ever lower appetite for sensibly managing risk? I'm not just saying let's just be anarchic about it. I agree with that. You've got to balance things up, but we always seem to balance on the extreme side of caution, I would say.
I think there's a couple of different things going on here. So I would say that, first of all, there is a correct diminishing appetite for risk over time, which is associated with increasing longevity and increasing pleasantness of our lives. So if you're only going to live to 50 and you're 45, then you might well go out in a storm and risk getting squashed, because you've already had a good innings. Whereas if you're going to live to be 120, then the cost of going out in that storm when you're 45 is getting pretty high. In fact, I think that, to be honest, I think that's probably one of the main drivers, if not the biggest driver, of the reduction in tobacco use over the decades, is increasing longevity of non-tobacco uses. Makes it more and more expensive to do that. And I think that's just one illustration of something. In the case of tobacco, is quite a clear one. You die at 60, 65, but if you smoke...
You're saying if you were going to die at 65 anyway, then sort of what's the problem? But if now you've got a fair chance of making it to 100...
That's right, it gets very expensive. And you have much the same thing with, high fat, salt and sugar, and general lifestyle things and other kinds of risks. And it may well be that in the future it turns out that there are things which we think are perfectly ordinary to do today, that if they made the difference between you living at 100 and 130, how often would you drink your beer, for example?
I'm a lifer on that one too.
But you are. But if you were 20 and you thought, well, if I drink beer all my life, then I'm going to live to be 100, and if I don't drink beer, I'm going to live to be 130. Then it might make a difference.
I guess so.
And I think that there is that, but at the same time,
we're going to die of boredom aged 130, basically.
But there's also the rest of life is pretty exciting when you're not doing those things these days compared with the past. We have a quite exotic set of things to do, and that's actually one of the things with some of the stuff like lockdown. I mean, once upon a time, if everybody had been closed in their houses, then what would you have been able to do? Whereas the number of things that we've found to entertain ourselves with our very diverse modern lives, it gives us lots of different opportunities of ways to go about things.
Well, if you enjoyed that conversation, why not watch one of these other videos? And while you're here, remember to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. That way, you'll never miss out on a single IEA broadcast.